Could I invite the Styx Working Party to come forward?
Thank you.
Is it Jan Burney, Gary Sharlock, and are you bringing...
Barry Robertson.
Oh, right. Oh, yes, sorry. I only had B written there. That was down the bottom and other names have been crossed out, so sorry.
Hi, thank you for hearing our submission. It is Barry Robertson, Marina Weilers and Jan Burney. Good afternoon, my name is Jan Burney, my home is Brooklands, Lower Styx. Thank you for the opportunity to submit and speak upon the long-term plan. This submission represents the views of the community representatives, members of the Styx Papanui Innis Coastal Burwood Community Board Working Party. The community representatives endorse the joint working party submission in part. We note that the Papanui Innis Burwood Coastal support the resolutions in the joint submission, but notes it will be subject to the land drainage staff determining the timing of the works within their project prioritisation. We note that the application of the guidance criteria to determine the long-term plan outcomes, including the capital program and projects and funding within it, is not set by CCC staff, but is set variously at council executive level and by elected members and implemented only by council staff. I've been following the submissions on the live stream, and it's heartening to hear the individuals and community groups and organisations speaking upon issues that show a lot of areas are moving past disaster recovery to community and individual regeneration. Unfortunately, this is not so for our Lower Styx small settlement communities. The CCC has no targeted strategy for regeneration or area plan for one of the hardest hit areas from the natural disaster events, almost 8 years past the natural disaster. The Christchurch City Council state in the Christchurch City Council 30-year infrastructure strategy 2018-2048, they are still to make decisions about the funding, timing and scope of the regeneration projects, taking into account all the other work that needs to be undertaken across the city. We understand that the restraints of the budgets, but we representatives have asked about prioritisation for capital works funding to meet the CCC statutory obligations, the levels of service to provide flood protection and stormwater management in a sustainable manner. Our customer expectations have not been met in this long-term plan. I think I had some photographs, thank you. Yep. The Council's 4 community outcomes: strong communities, livable city, healthy environment, prosperous economy. The 4 overarching issues affecting the Council's infrastructure of asset renewals, climate change, post-earthquake recovery and regeneration, and affordability. The long-term priorities. The Lower Styx catchment needs a coordinated works program and funding now in the short term to alleviate and mitigate the effects of growth and development and to repair the flood defences, waterways and amenities as a consequence of the prolonged earthquake events. The Styx Stormwater Management Long-Term Plan funding is allocated to provide for growth. The Stormwater Management Plan aims to maintain and improve the 6 values for waterways. Without investment in stormwater treatment, then water quality will continue to degrade as further land use and intensification takes place. The Styx catchment is identified as the highest growth area for the duration of this long-term plan. The Canterbury Regional Decision, 26th of June 2013, was sought to implement the Styx SMP with the consent CRC 131439. The Styx Stormwater Management Plan was informed by the Belfast Area Plan. The Styx Catchment Belfast Area Plan 2010 identifies this growth, but was not informed by an area plan for the receiving environment, the Lower Styx, and yet our waterway, the Lower Styx River, services 1/3 of the city's stormwater discharge. The Council Option 1 provides Stormwater Management Plan 55 million, but the capital works identified are in the upper reaches of the catchment to provide for growth. There is no funding for the Lower Styx receiving environment. Our priority and expectation is that the costs need to be spread evenly between cost, benefit and contribution to mitigated of effects in the receiving environment. The growth areas benefit, but the receiving environment where the effects are felt are degenerating. The funding priorities are not fairly distributed, neither is the timing of works allocated for funding. There is real concern in the lower Styx communities. We are watching our areas disrespected, deteriorated and disregarded as earthquake flood issues are worsening, and yet these flood issues and earthquake effects have been identified and acknowledged. The Styx earthquake effects, Graham Harrington and Tom Parsons informed part of our report and showed that those effects were identified as early as 2012. There is intense frustration in the community on the basis that the council seem to be not addressing flooding issues. The council may be reviewing the condition of its drainage assets, but residents perceive that the CCC do not appear to be adequately reviewing the performance of the drainage assets and their current fitness for purpose. The earthquakes have lowered the river, reduced its capacity to handle stormwater, but the council, ECAN and others are going ahead with developments which further exacerbate the flooding situation for residents. Residents believe that such developments should not be permitted until the current drainage flooding situation is fully understood and the rights of existing residents protected. Development has increased flooding on land adjacent and near to developments by reducing the area in the catchment available for ponding and soakage, speeding up for runoff of the overload and damaged drainage system, closing off farm drains which is effectively draining existing and nearby properties so that the stormwater around the properties now ponds on these properties, damaging waterways, utility assets so they no longer function effectively. Areas around the lower Styx have been designated areas around the lower Styx have been newly designated as flood ponding areas, but the residents have not been adequately consulted upon this. It therefore appears as if the residents are being expected to put up with more flood ponding on their land in order to accommodate increased or differently timed storm water runoff from developments and lack of earthquake remediation to banks, riverbed, and also there is no acknowledgement of the Brooklands Lagoon inundation in the southern end. Residents feel that their land is being sacrificed for urban development to the extent that there is a feeling that the CCC is deliberately letting residents' properties get flooded so residents will leave, sell their properties to the CCC so that the CCC can use the land for flood ponding. Despite this lack of performance of information on drainage assets, these organisations have pursued and issued building and resource consents for new developments. Developments using these consents are now causing increased flooding of neighbouring properties, but the council, ECAN and developers appear unwilling to take responsibility for this new flooding. Developer contributions for new land use consents are not reflected in the long-term planned budget. These contributions appear to be absorbed and lost in the central pool of funds. There is no contribution to the receiving environment. The contribution appears to have been designated to designate the predominantly rural land and rural residential properties as flood ponding areas. This is not mitigation. This is abdication of responsibility to mitigate the increased risk and effects, both of development and earthquake effects. It's almost a token gesture towards operational activities to placate residents from past decades of inaction of maintenance upon the river is to put forward, and there is no funding for earthquake damage effects for flood issues. Homes have been identified as more vulnerable to flooding in the GDH report 2014. Where's the capital funding to protect the homes? Consequences of increase in flood can result in social, health and safety and economic effects in the community. If flood risk at higher post-earthquake levels is not addressed, then this will result in damage to houses, businesses, rural businesses, infrastructure, increased clean-up costs, psychological impacts upon people directly affected. It will also have several indirect impacts, including reduced economic activity, increase in insurance costs, stresses on public health system, delays in access for emergency response, and social degradation for repeated flooding. We need confidence that our homes, communities and small settlements and facilities and environment are protected from the cumulative effects of exacerbated flooding due to effects of increased growth in the upper catchment and from damage to rivers beds, lateral spread and change in topography from earthquakes. Post-quake land zoning decisions affecting our area must have reduced the infrastructure, road and wastewater management and renewal costs to the council. Give back to our lower Styx catchments for that sacrifice. Our area gave, give back. The Local Government Act requires the water supply, wastewater, stormwater, flood protection and control works, roads and footpaths are included in the infrastructure strategy. The council vision says opportunity for all, not opportunity for some, not winners and losers. Effective management of stormwater runoff reduces the risk of flooding, reduces the impact of stormwater on the receiving environment. A well-performing stormwater drainage network contributes to multiple values such as ecology, recreation, culture, heritage and landscape. It is an also important part of developing resilience to hazards and climate change stresses. The stormwater drainage network is provided and maintained to remove stormwater, protecting the community from surface flooding during storm events. A healthy waterway is part of a healthy environment. We need high priority enhancement of the lower Styx catchment, natural environment, waterway quality, facilities, recreational assets need to be maintained and developed alongside growth in the upper catchment. There's no clarity about how the costs of implementation will be allocated. When will Council make some significant decisions regarding funding, timing and scope of regeneration projects in the lower Styx, beyond what is already approved? How can we accelerate this process through the capital funding? The long-term plan 2018-28 service plan for the flood protection and control works as at March 2018 states, the citywide stormwater model validated by floor level surveys is being used to better define the extent of the flood risk and will inform long-term sustainable decision making. The community representatives on the working party have continually asked for the updated citywide stormwater model, but we have been told it's not available. Clearly it is. The facilitator appointed by the council to assist residents complied a list of 10 questions raised by the representative members. These have not been answered. I've asked a series of questions for validation on the floor level surveys used to determine the extent of the flood risk, but these have not been answered since October 2016. We have appreciated the joint members, the community board members, council staff being upon the working party, and we realise the constraints. Just as a final, the chlorination, the Christchurch Central, Brooklands, Kayanga Harbour Basin, the infrastructure strategy, page 60 states the Christchurch Central, Brooklands, Kayanga, Littleton Harbour and Wainui water supplies are currently fed from secure groundwater supplies. Why have we been chlorinated? Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the others want to speak as well?
Yes, there's Ms. Tommy, do you want to speak?
I'm doing an individual submission after the working party.
Okay.
It's pretty well recognised that the Styx River is up to full capacity with it. Even, I don't know how you can dispute that with it flooding the last 12 months, even the height of summer through the drought, it wasn't retaining within its banks. And under the Drainage Board Act, it states that you cannot put any more subdivisions into a river if it cannot handle that. And the Styx catchment is designated to be the highest growth of any catchment in the area of the city. Well, that was told to us by the your engineers. So if you're going to put all this extra subdivisions into this catchment, why are you not doing anything to the lower Styx River? It's not legal. You cannot do it. You'll get a class action against the council because what you are doing now doesn't comply with the stormwater consent from the ECAN was up in 2017 as far as I know, and it's been put off and put off and put off because they know they can't comply, so they're putting more and more subdivisions in because they know they don't comply now. So why? And it's still, you still haven't actually gone for that consent, and if you don't get that consent, you will not be able to put one more thing into the Styx River, and all these subdivisions that are sitting there will not be able to go into it. So it's in your own interest to spend some money into the Styx to get it up so it can hold the capacity of the water it's going to flow with these subdivisions. After the earthquake, there was lots of lateral spreading, there was cracks, and they're still sitting there up to your waist, and all that soil is moving into the river. Now, not at great cost, you could run a digger down there and take that out at the moment, but as soon as that gets into the river, it's going to be a huge cost of removing that. So the longer this is put off, it's going to cost the council more and more and more money. It'll be like 10 or 100 times what it's going to cost to do in the future to what it's going to do now. With having the highest growth in our area, we should have some of that money. I mean, just in the Preston subdivision, I think there's 500 million spent there. We never got 1 cent towards our lower catchment of the Styx River. We're suffering all the effects. All that money is taken over, spent on the Heathcote and the Avon and everywhere else. Nothing is spent on ours. If we're 1/3 of the catchment, we should get 1/3 of the money. We're not. We're getting a trickle of the money to the size of our catchment and to the size of the people that are feeding water into us. It's not fair. If we were just getting, if we had 1/3 of the budget, we could actually maintain that river and do enough works to make it handle the flow of the water. But it is not handling the flow of the water now. There's been various reports, and all these reports, I think 6 reports, all these reports say the same thing. They're saying about nid points, are saying about, they have to widen it, saying the river's up to full capacity. Why are the engineers, why are they getting all these reports costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then the engineers are just disobeying that information and not doing one thing the reports say? If they do a report, surely if you're going to spend that money, you should do what the report says. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. Even recently, we've had the situation on the last OPIS report where they've meted all the nid points, which are a lot of the narrowing points, which are the main ones that are affecting the greatest. And then the last money that was spent on it was not done on. It was done on one nid point, and instead of running down there being a very simple thing, taking the thing back, they decided they want to put on a big show and just dig it out just at the edge of Spencerville there. And it wasn't done for the flow of the river. It was done for the public opinion. To me, the whole thing seems a waste of time. We've had the working committee there. We spent a lot of time, and the idea of that working committee was to get a budget in for this, so we didn't have to put a submission in for this, and it was never done. We had no budget allowed for us for the whole time. There's a budget for the Avon, a budget for the Heathcote, for major developments, for earthquake remuneration. There's a plan for the Avon, there's a plan for the Heathcote, there's no plan for the Styx. How can you not have a plan? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, there's no disputing if you put a subdivision into a river, the peak flow will go up. Even if there's holding ponds work to 100%, they only work to 1 in 25, 1 in 50 flood. When it's over that event, all that water gets dumped straight into the river. Now, in the Preston subdivision, those holding ponds don't even hold a 1 in 10 flood. I've got photos sitting there, if you want them, I've got them sitting there, showing it flowing over their holding ponds in a 1 in 8 year flood, 1 in 8 year event, and that's with not one house in the subdivision. So when those houses are going in there, which they are now, it's probably going to hold a 1 in 5 year flood. That's what their holding capacity is on that. I mean, there is answers to this. There's answers now. There's a lot of water could be re-diverted out of Capitone, or with the Northern Arterial coming through. You could run a drain down from the Northern Arterial straight to the Waimak. There's the drain, the freezing works pipeline. Some of that could be utilised, and for re-diverting some of the water, there's various streams and creeks that could be re-diverted into the Waimak and not. I mean, here in the paper it says Belfast to double in size. Well, that water's going to come down to us unless it's re-diverted into the Waimak. That's coming straight down to us, and in a river that's over capacity. We are now going to receive water from the Flockton Basin. We never have before. Why are we being sacrificed? Why are we second? We feel like we're second-class citizens. All our money for our subdivisions, which is the council, of course. It's the council problem. It's not ours. You're making us suffer for the money you are receiving out of subdivisions, and it's a great deal of money. One subdivision, $500 million. It's a lot of money, and it's like a tipping point. There's there's so many more industrial subdivisions all up the planned, all up the track, and they're all going to come into the Styx River, and in 5 or 10 years' time the peak flow in that river will be flooding people out, and the potential for danger is huge. I mean, I've actually had to pull out cars out of that river, and it's been over the top of the river. It's not going to be long. There was 2 in one meeting we went in there. It's not going to be long before someone dies, and who's going to be responsible for that? The council's responsible, because you could have maintained this. You're not complying with the law as it sits. So I'm open to any questions.
Well, we've come to the end of the 15 minutes. But obviously, look, you've raised a whole lot of points. I honestly thought Preston's was discharging into the Horseshoe Lake. So, and we have got plans for wetlands developments on the other side of the Horseshoe Lake for that reason. But
actually, can I just mention something there? When they calculate their plans for their storage of the water, they calculate them out, and with the rise over the earthquakes and everything else, the actual depth, say they've calculated it this deep. Now with the water level going up of the river, there's only that much storage in those ponds now. It's only half of what was expected to be there, which at the time wasn't enough. Right. You know, I know for a fact under the Preston subdivision there was supposed to be holding tanks in every house, because the engineer that did the original work on that told me that, and then someone else took over that development, and all those, after the earthquake, all those holding tanks got scrapped. So there is no reserve in that subdivision for the house water. It's only for the road water.
Right. Well, look, you've raised a lot of issues, and I mean the submissions obviously that came in from the working group has been, with the working party, have been quite extensive, and we're obviously going to have to do quite a bit of work on them. But you know, thank you very much for making the submission. Thank you for the work that you do, being involved in the working party. It is important, and there's a lot of work that we need to be seeking some further reports on and responding to in terms of the LTP.
Yeah. If you do a report, will you be acting on that report?
Well, we're in a
past.
process at the moment, and there are 2 elements to what you've done. One is there's the LTP, and you've quite rightly raised questions around budgeting and when things are appearing on budget for work to be done. The other is the overarching planning, and I think that there's more than one issue involved, because once you get right down into the Brooklands area, then you've got red zone. The government's indicated that they want to transfer that land to the council, and that there's obviously a considerable amount of work around regeneration planning that needs to be done. So it's at a confluence, I guess, of a number of issues that do need to be taken into account in a different way. So one's a long-term plan issue, and that's the funding side of things in terms of the budget that is required to be on there. Sometimes things are on budget, but they don't look apparent because they're hidden in different programs of work, and the other issue is that whole regeneration planning across the whole area of the Styx River, which is what the working party is all about. So, but look, Marina, do you want to refer to your submission now?
No, I'm actually just wanted to follow up with something that Barry said about rediverting the water. Is that we have actually just had a really large poisoning event in the Kapatoni Creek, which runs into the Styx. I think over 800 fish died. We had huge eels and trout butting up against the wee bridge that you just saw on the photo over there. And I'm just putting it out there that when you guys do look, rediverting water from that industrial area out towards the Waimakariri River would possibly be a really good option, because the lower Styx catchment is saturated at the moment. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, well, thank you very much.
Yeah. It's just the lower Styx River is supposed to be the cleanest river in Christchurch, so it's probably one of the only one left. It's I think it's just about in Canterbury, so it's because it's spring fed, so it's probably going to be, if you're going to clean up, keep any river clean, it's probably the river to keep clean.
Yeah. No, look, thank you very much for your submission. We'll take it on board. Thank you. Marina, I'm just going to